Arizabo, Puerto Rico, a privately owned medical corporation is trying to do what was previously viewed as impossible, which is implanting the consciousness of the dead into robots. In order to do so, they have assembled some of the brightest brains on Earth, including the brilliant biologist, Will Foster. The company is experiencing a lot of pressure to perform, and the company has severe problems with the transfer of consciousness. Will thinks he is so close to cracking the code and wants to be given a bit more time, but the company director, Jones, is very strict with his team. One morning starts with the showing up of the body of a soldier who died in battle some 7 hours before. The scientists, after a number of tests, find out that the neural data of the deceased soldier can be downloaded and used in the future. In hopes of making some breakthrough in biology, Will requests the information to be downloaded directly out of the brain of the soldier. This is done with a special machine that places a needle in the eye. After the data, the memories, experiences, and feelings have been downloaded, Will programs the consciousness to get it ready to be resurrected. The information is sent to Robot 345, which has its artificial intelligence turned on to do the process. Having verified each of the stages, Will orders the team to start up the robot to see whether the transfer was successful. As the resurrected soldier is brought online, Will attempts to ask him a couple of questions, but his attention is completely on something else. He is curious to find out what he is, and how he got into the body of a robot. Feeling bewildered and irritated, he loses track and listens no longer. There comes a time when the soldier quite literally goes out of control in his mind, leading to a rejection of the transferred consciousness. He attempts to ruin himself, sheet after sheet of metal on his face and body. The robot system is unable to be shut down through a computer since it has caused much damage, and the system refuses to accept the reality of his situation, so Will has to manually switch off the experiment. Will, his assistant Ed, and Jones are not pleased with the result. Will sees it as a big breakthrough, though it failed temporarily. In the past, the transferred consciousnesses were not able to speak. They were mere shadows of a human person. This time, the advance is far more apparent. Yet again, it will have to contend with the titanic task of mastering the transfer of consciousness. He begs them to grant him time to find the solution and present the results. Jones isn't convinced. Unless the company manufactures a fully functioning sample within the next few months, Bayanine may be closed down. It is a terrible day, and another failure, and Will comes home to spend the weekend with his wife, Mona, and their 3 children. Their eldest daughter Sophie, their son Matt, and daughter Zoe. Soon Ed visits to give them keys to their boat so that they can have some time in the open ocean. As Will tells Mona about his work progress, he is skeptical about the information. She is a hospital doctor and feels that what he is doing is unethical and against the very fabric of nature. To her, there is no possible transfer of consciousness, as human and the brain are not mere data. They are much more than that. Will greatly disagrees and believes that even love can be reduced to science as a chemical reaction, and that human feelings and emotions, among other qualities, can be duplicated and reproduced. It is simply a question of finding the right puzzles to solve, proving not only his abilities as a biologist, but a programmer. Attempting to relax and get away. As Will and his family drive to the pier, a heavy rainstorm strikes and the visibility on the road is decreased to nearly zero. They almost hit a truck at some point that comes into their way. Will just escapes the crash, and it appears that the worst is past. However, a minute later, he sees a tree bending under the pressure of the wind. The tree drops on them and a log impales Mona through the stomach, killing her immediately. Shocked, Will loses concentration and control of the car, which crashes onto a guardrail and falls off a cliff into a small body of water. Will comes to himself a few minutes later and discovers that their car is partially submerged. Mona has died, and worse, the rear of the automobile is filled with water, trapping Sophie, Zoe, and Matt, who drown. In desperation, Will yanks their bodies out of the car and hauls them ashore. Despairing into utter despair, he cannot come to terms with the loss and makes a desperate and brave decision. He does not call the police or an ambulance, but calls Ed and orders his colleague to come at once, for bodies on the shore are shocked when Ed arrives. He advises Will to dial the police and report the accident, but Will declines. Will understands that the brains of his family can be saved and that they are not dead. He and Ed scan their consciousnesses using the company's equipment and save the data on memory cards. Then they go to the office to make the impossible possible, to revive the dead. Will does not desire simply to put the consciousness in robots. His desire is to produce clone bodies. Ed has been cloning, years on, and has special cubes to cultivate appropriate biological material. Ed is a cynic and thinks that the success probability is almost non-existent. The besties had over the years been working with his cloning rats and turtles, but they may as well had defects and the nervous system problems and congenital diseases leading to premature death. Will takes the risky venture believing that the worst in his life is already over. He is willing to make the gamble and is aware that the result will not be perfect, but he wants Ed to go with him regardless. The triumph of cloning will merely make empty shells of humans that lack consciousness, but Will believes that together with their methods, they can generate a human being. He desires to be able to pass consciousness. All his previous efforts have not succeeded, but to clone a body, one needs special equipment and 17 days to be mature. Precisely, how many years will we need to resolve the issue and overcome the crisis of transferring a human consciousness into another body? Will then goes back home after stealing some of the equipment in the office and requests Ed to dispose of the bodies of his wife and children. He cannot bury them. In case the person realizes this, the whole experiment would be revealed and destroyed. Hours later, Ed shows up at the house of Will with the rest of the equipment. However, his cloning cubes are only 3, and this fact does not give Will an opportunity to resurrect his whole family. He now has an unbearable choice who will not come back. Will attempts to write the names on slips of paper, then he cannot make the choice. He requests Ed to assist him, yet his colleague declines since he has no moral right to decide on the destiny of other human lives. Will picks a name through blind luck, and it is Zoe. The youngest daughter is not going to be brought back to life. Upon making all preparations to clone, Ed reminds the rest that a 7-second malfunction in equipment might ruin the samples. It will take 17 days to create a full body, yet stable power is by no means an option. Being quick and action-oriented, Will does everything himself. He goes into the cars of his neighbors to steal their batteries lest there are any short-term power stoppages that will spoil the process. All this is watched with distrust by Ed. He does not believe that they will achieve this, but there is one logical question that he cannot avoid asking. So what shall we do with Zoe and all memories of her? Will finds a pragmatic but atrocious solution. He will directly interfere in the memories of Mona, Matt, and Sophie, and erase all the memories of Zoe. Will finds himself alone with his thoughts and understands that he can do anything to keep his family alive. He is willing to violate the laws of science and even the laws of nature itself so as to realize his desire. With the help of a special device, he also penetrates into the memories of his dead wife and children and erases all memories of Zoe. He finds himself almost insane with the thoughts of his daughter, and he finds it difficult to keep the tears, but he knows that he has to take everything that reminds her so as to avoid the clash of memories. Several days on, police appear in front of the door of Will. He is scared that they have learned of his experiments, but luckily, they are searching stolen car batteries and they have no idea about him. In the meantime, Jones realizes that Will has not been at work and pressurizes the scientists to get the results. He demands that Will report to the office, which compels Ed to cover him by claiming that he is ill. Fearful of his job loss, Will requests Ed to remain with the capsules as he goes to the office. In case the company fails, the equipment will be confiscated and the cloning project would be completely stopped. Later, Will comes home and gets confronted by the teacher of Matt. She is concerned that he has stopped going to classes and she has come to see whether he is alright. Ed reminds him that Mona, Sophie, and Matt led a life beyond the house. They communicated with peers and classmates, as well as friends, and it is impossible to miss their absence. Will understands that he has to act or the questions and problems will be forthcoming that he cannot resolve. Will uses the mobile phones of his deceased wife and children to compensate when they are not available. He begins to speak to them explaining miss school and work as being sick. He turns down advances of a young man on his eldest daughter, declares that his children are going to homeschool, and even tells the friends of Matt that he is temporarily on house arrest due to his misconduct. Meanwhile, Robot 345 is being repaired at the company where preparations are being made on a new donor. Will carries on with his desperate and largely unsuccessful efforts to resolve the crisis of consciousness transfer. All algorithms and strategies go wrong and time is running out. Mona, Sophie, and Matt emerge out of the cubes as complete bodies shortly. Awe and shock befall Will. Ed comes back after 17 days and assists in waking up the clones and removing them out of the cubes. Will asks for more time. Problems with data transfer are not solved yet Ed is not able to stop the biological process. He was able to carry the 3 in the cubes, but each day would add years, decades, to them. In a week, the children of Will would seem older than he is. Will develops a strategy that is just as breathtaking as it is efficient. Mona, Matt, and Sophie are taken out of the cubes as soon as possible. He puts them under heavy tranquilizer. This gives him some more days to work out an escape out of the crisis where they remain kept alive on IVs. Will watches a video of a chat with a dead soldier whose mind was implanted in a robot. robot. He is not able to comprehend the reason of the mistakes and does not see the possibility to correct them. It all sounds hopeless, and at one point, he thinks that he might need to come to terms with the fact that his family is indeed dead. At one of the injections, Jones calls, insisting that something needs to be done in the lab. Meanwhile, Will sees a response in the brain of Mona to his touch. Then he suddenly understands that he was wrong in everything and calls Ed to finish the cloning process. By demonstrating to Ed the reactions and reflexive responses of the brain, Will tells him that he is finally able to comprehend why the prior experiments did not work. The human brain was unwilling to be transferred to a robot body since it could not experience a real body or internal organs. The frenzy pushed the brain to its limit as the brain was unable to transmit simple impulses and the reflexive feedback, leading to the breakdown of the whole system. This is not a problem with clones. The mind is put in a living body. Will and Ed bring Mona to life, testing his theory. Her body for a few seconds shivers as though repelling the transfer, and then all is steady. They revive Sophie and Matt, knowing they have made a scientific breakthrough. Will gives his children and wife one more dose of sedative before they resume their normal life. This is needed to eliminate any evidence of experiments, IVs, equipment, and any other thing that may create doubts. He destroys any sign of Zoe. The girl is dead, and her pictures will only lead to trouble. Will takes all the childhood pictures, throws Zoe's things and toys away, and removes the ladder off the bunk bed. The last activity is to remove a drawing on the kitchen table, and here he bursts in tears. Zoe will be remembered only by him. The following morning, Will wakes up without his wife. He runs to the kitchen panicked and discovers Mona, Matt, and Sophie sitting at the kitchen table, eating breakfast, as though nothing has occurred. It is a little disturbing, but Will does not bother with it. He is just happy that his family survived. Later, Mona takes a walk, and she feels something is off inside her, as it seems her brain is not accepting her internal organs. In the meantime, the children are very hungry and begin to ask questions concerning the last few days. They forget about the boat ride, school activities, and time with friends. Will puts his phones away, yet the questions continue, including ones about trivial things such as spoiled milk, although Mona distinctly recalls purchasing it only the day before. This sequence of little happenings at home is broken by a phone call by Ed, and his companion insists that we should at once proceed to the business to do another experiment. Soon they are going to get the body of another soldier, and they will need to somehow get consciousness into a robot. Otherwise, the company may be closed down. When Will gets to the office and checks out the brain, he understands that it is a half brain. No use in giving consciousness away. The mission would fail. The brain is close to death, which means that they will have to wait until the next donor. This creates conflict. There is little time, but the results are required urgently. Realizing that he must go to great lengths, Will takes the relevant equipment and confines himself in the bathroom. Even Jones is not told about it, as he downloads his own consciousness wearing a helmet. The scientist is now sure that this will end the crisis of consciousness transfer, as he can basically communicate with himself and persuade the robot that his condition is normal. Will that night invents new algorithms to allow his consciousness to live and operate independently, and the terrified scream of his daughter is the only thing that takes his mind off his job. Woken up by a nightmare, Sophie recalls that she was in a car crash and her mother had died, but Will tells her that it was only a dream. He has the understanding that the echoes of her memories will haunt her, so he reconnects the device to her brain to eliminate the extra information. Mona sees what is going on and starts to suspect her husband of testing the children. In an attempt to evade a scandal and resultant events, Will makes a desperate move and confides in his wife the truth. He says they all died and he has revived them by cloning. Although they do not have their own bodies, they are human and they are his family, and he can do anything to them. However, to his credit, Mona responds smoothly and empathetically, as though she already guessed that she was not a fully human person. Some days after, the couple visits a fair to purchase a Christmas tree. At some time, Mona sees a girl in red dress in the trees and cannot know why she looks so familiar. That night, the family begins to inquire about Zoe. They do not know anything about her, but came across her name in a cabinet. They also do not understand the bunk bed with nails that have no pictures and other minor peculiarities. Will does not know what to say, but a knock on the door interrupts their discussion, and Mr. Jones has come to discuss his illicit experiments with the scientist. He is aware that Mona, Sophie, and Matt are clones and will insist on repeating the successful experiments or his family will be killed. Bayon isn't a medical company. It is merely a disguise of experimentation by humans. What they really want is to develop weapons in the form of products, such as loading the mind of a programmer into a computer virus or to have a mind of a pilot to operate kamikaze drones. These developments can win wars, dominate societies, and manipulate world order. People will pay this, and not achieving results will be punishable by death. Jones is not a scientist or a head of a company. He is a contracted killer whose sole aim is to dictate the process and give outcomes to those who desire to be the rulers of the world. It dawns on Will that he and his family would be killed after he delivers the research, hence he chooses to kill first. He sedates Jones and ties the machine holding the stored data with a foil and places it in a microwave in order to destroy all the data. The family runs away as Jones commands his guards to track them down. The one and the only rule: do not shoot the scientist in the head, and his brain will not be damaged to transfer the data. The mercenaries start their hunt after tracing the location of the family. Will understands that the tracking is possible using the clones because each one of them has sensors literally implanted in their nervous system. Mona vows to help them with the problem provided they can make a stop at the hospital where she works. The family eludes perilously by escaping into hospital. The tracking sensors can only be rendered ineffective by overloading the nervous system, most easily accomplished using a defibrillator and high voltage. Working on impulse, Mona shocks Sophie and Matt, after which Will does the same to his wife. The family manages to disable the tracking system successfully and escape before they can be located by the mercenaries. They drive to the port where they take off the city by boat as Will continues the search of the keys. Mona, Matt, and Sophie are caught by the mercenaries and kidnapped by Jones. It happens that Ed, who was scared of losing his job, told him everything about the accident and the death of the family as well as about the cloning experiments of Will. Will goes to the office later on to negotiate. Several minutes later, he is putting an offer to release them in exchange of the algorithms, but Jones declines to bargain. Upon killing Ed, he intends to kill the rest. However, Will begs him not to kill them and agrees to download his brain data at the expense of Jones being ignorant. The scientist does not recreate his consciousness into a machine. He instead uploads it into Robot 345 and makes it work. Will begs them to be set free, but Jones says he had no plan of releasing them. He desires to murder everybody, but there is one thing that stands in his path. The robot has successfully passed the crisis of consciousness transfer and managed to escape its metal shackles. Once the robot kills one of the guards, it is now armed to defend its maker and his family and assaults both Jones and the mercenaries. Upon evaluating the whole family, Will comes back to halt the robot and speak to it. He shows 345 that it has an opportunity to be a full-fledged creature without Will. Besides, he gives Jones a deal to have a second opportunity in life. Jones concurs right before his death. 17 days later, Will and his family have overcome all their problems and fly away to begin a new life in a foreign land. Before leaving Puerto Rico, Will use the cube of the company to revive baby Zoe. In the meantime, Clone Jones and Robot will start a new profitable business, life extension and human cloning. On their way to Dubai, they encounter their first customer, an old disabled man who is ready to spend billions of dollars on the second life. Subscribe to watch more videos like this, leave a comment about your favorite movie, and we will make it next. Thanks for watching.